The GPS tags not only send the location of the bird, but they also give us some information about the temperatures, which is a mixture between outside temperature and body temperature of the bird, and this called accelerometer data, which shows if a tag is actually still moving when it's on the bird, in kind of which position the bird is. So when we check the data, we see that a bird is resting or staying a longer time at a certain place. We need to check if the temperature is still okay, if this accelerometer data is still showing a normal behavior of the bird, and hence we get all that information taken together to see that a bird is still fine. We have to assume as long as it's flying that it's actually doing fine, but if it's not moving anymore, if it's staying in the same place, we need to make sure that we know that the bird is fine, so that when we actually go to the field and check on site with observations to see if the bird is fine, or in the worst case, when a bird died, to actually retrieve the bird and find the cause of mortality, which will then help us to act and take actions on the different conservation measures. You asked how many bones a bearded vulture can actually eat. Usually they just eat 200 to 300 grams per day, but if they're quite hungry they can also eat much more. We once had a bird that swallowed 2 or 3 roe deer legs, a couple of ribs, some vertebrae, and on top of that a couple of meat pieces. He was quite hungry. He also then rested for a bit, but usually they just eat a bit less, but they can swallow quite a lot of the time.
A few decades ago, vulture populations in Europe saw a sharp decline, making sightings rare. Thanks to improved farming practices and conservation efforts, their numbers have increased, particularly those of griffon vultures, which are now quite common in some areas. As vulture patrol wild or livestock areas for carcasses, there's been also a rise in the misconception that they could attack live, healthy animals. And this erroneous perception is fueled by sensationalized news reports. To ease this conflict, solutions include, for example, setting up networks of supplementary feeding sites where farmers can leave carcasses for vultures. Also fostering dialogue among stakeholders and, of course, raising awareness among rural communities, journalists and educators about the importance and the ecology of vultures.
Probably the biggest challenge is how to create a new breeding pairs. Bearded vultures are very picky and will not pair with just any individual, but they can also be very aggressive and attack very heavily each other when they put a male and a female together. So it's a process that requires a very close monitoring. Even if they don't attack to each other, sometimes it takes months to become a pair, and even longer to become a breeding pair. Actually, we have a case here where we had a female that refused 6 males before accepting the male who eventually was his mate during 16 years.
So, how to work with vultures professionally? This is the million-dollar question that many of you have asked. I am José Tavares, the director of the Vulture Conservation Foundation. Unfortunately, there are very few jobs out there on vulture conservation. The VCF, one of the leading vulture conservation organizations in the world, only employs about 19 people across Europe. We simply do not have the funds to employ more people. We would love to. There's plenty of work to do, but unfortunately we do not have the funds to grow our workforce. When we do recruit, what are we looking for? It's basically experience and knowledge. hands-on experience on the topics that we are recruiting for, practical experience on projects or on the topic that the person is being recruited for, and then knowledge, a person with some education, formal or informal, on the topic that we need the person for. So the main message here is invest in yourself. Try to learn the new tools and trades of the job. Try to get abreast of all the new developments. Study. Try to do courses, particularly on the new tendencies that will certainly dominate the conservation world and vulture conservation world: artificial intelligence, communication, technology guiding conservation efforts, monitoring, research, communication, and I guess a bit of luck is needed as well. Good luck, you all, and do monitor the website of the Vulture Conservation Foundation. We do recruit once in a while, and we advertise all our positions there. All the best.
Hello there. Thank you for your question and for contacting us, and thank you for your interest on vulture conservation. My name is José Tavares, and I am the director of the Vulture Conservation Foundation. So, answering your question, I think I have to mention two very important milestones. 1987, which was the year in which the first wild pair of birded vulture in the Alps started to breed, following reintroductions there. These reintroductions had started 11 years earlier in 1986, and this important milestone showed that reintroductions and restocking do work and are a fantastic tool to restore vulture populations across Europe. Following that, we've been reintroducing vultures in many other places in Europe, from Spain to France to Bulgaria to Italy to Cyprus. But that date, 1987, marks the beginning of the reintroduction efforts for vultures in Europe. Second milestone, 2017, the year in which the CMS, the Convention for Migratory Species, approved the Vulture Multi-Species Action Plan, which is basically a global blueprint for old world vulture conservation, a document that sets the priorities for vulture conservation in Europe, Asia and Africa, and that has really started to turn the tide of vulture conservation awareness and vulture conservation action all over the world.